Thank you, Megan. Thank you so much. There's your hug. My name is Sharon. I'm an alcoholic. And gosh, I'm sorry I couldn't do my virtual background. I tried. Joe and I, I look like a lizard. The light was coming through me. I thought it's like the book said, maybe I'm being transmuted. I don't know. I was like, but it's a little bit easier on me too. But I like to look at the gallery. So sometimes I have a very dry sense of humor. So if I don't see you laughing, I'll let you know it's a joke. Anyway, thank you, Joe and Deb and Amot and Paul. Thank you for reading that. That was quite a talk we had, and there's been a whole lot of discussion around how Alcoholics Anonymous was going to survive in the pandemic. And I want to have my propers before I go there. I really enjoyed Corey and Hilda. I love, and I've worked with her. I've sponsored her a long time, and she definitely is a miracle. And thank you, Eric, for your work, and Jim and Taz and Lou. I had so much fun dancing with last night. And then I started my morning with Jeff and both errands. And then Carl, my friend, and I enjoyed Ray very much. And I love Lori and Cliff. They're just such a good example of the traditions and the fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I certainly had a good time with all of you so far. But when the pandemic hit, the New York Times spotlighted Alcoholics Anonymous in their magazine, and it was like 2 weeks into the pandemic. It was 2 weeks into the lockdown, right at the beginning. And they had, I can't even remember them all. I'd love to find the article again. There were 7 groups of people they highlighted that had gotten up and running so quickly. And one of them was Alcoholics Anonymous. And they talked about the online recovery group that got up in a week out of Los Angeles. That one of the girls I sponsor was her first name was in there. I was so proud of her because she's such a techie. And we were in there, and they were so excited that we were able to get our meetings going. And alcoholics, oh my goodness, right? And we were right between we were right below the 24-hour flute players. Beat us out a little bit. They were on right away, those 24-hour flute players. And then the last one that we were ahead of was the virtual baptisms. And the parents weren't happy about it, but the babies were, because they didn't have to get dunked, I guess. They just had a little water poured on their head. So Alcoholics Anonymous, we showed up for each other, because one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic has still been happening through all of this. And I just want to say, my girls, I'm almost going to cry. The women I sponsor, I've watched it just blossom. I watched it just blow up with how they're women that haven't sponsored before are sponsoring. We had 148 on an in the line meeting last week, and from all over the world. And that's the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous, is that we are touching people that haven't been able to even connect with somebody other than a very small meeting where they're from, or like Australia's blowing up with people that we know. And it's so beautiful to watch that, we're survivors. We are the lucky ones. Norm Alpe used to talk about seconds and inches, and we are the lucky ones, just by the hair on our chinny chin, that we get to sit in a meeting, even virtually, of Alcoholics Anonymous and know that there's hope. And I was with you in 1998, and it's been an awful long time since I've been back, and I was so looking forward to all of that. But that's okay. I'm going to live another 10 years. Maybe I'll be in consideration at some point. I have a lot more to do yet. I was a bad alcoholic. I have to continue to make living amends. And I'm just going to tell the end of Carl's story now. He's probably not going to be happy about it, but I asked him at the end of his talk about the Christmas list. And since we had that big virtual tour with nobody in the hallways, it was so strange, but it was very pretty, the hallways where you guys are in that hotel. And so I asked Carl at the end to please tell us about the Christmas letter, Carl never made the Christmas letter. He had one line at the end of his family had all this, they were doing great things, and his sisters and his brother. And then it would say, Carl is 22. That was his only line in the Christmas letter. And that was 3 years before he got sober. And he didn't finish the story because it really is an amends story, and I love it. So I'm telling a little bit of his story that he didn't get to finish. And many years later, he loves golf because he golfed with my husband for years. They love golf. And he was golfing with one of his father's friends. He went to town to speak. He called his father's friend. He said, yeah, let's go out on the course. And it was his father's friend. And he made a lot of amends to his family. And so he was out in the course, and this gentleman kept saying, well, Carl, tell me about that foundation that you are working on. And Carl thought, well, how does he know about the foundation? But he told him about it. And then he asked him about something else, maybe one of the courses that he had played and done very well at. And finally, Carl just said, how do you know all these things about my life? And Carl was sober then maybe 15 years. And the gentleman, who was his father's friend, said, well, I get the Christmas letter every year, Carl. It tells me all about your life. So Carl made the Christmas letter in a good way. And I think that's just such a beautiful amends story. So I just wanted to finish it because he didn't. And that's what we do for each other. All those of us that have known each other a long time, we finish each other's stories. Oh, I don't know. But I've been sober since August 20th, 1975. And for that, I am so grateful. I had no idea I was going to be given a brand new life, that I was going to be reborn, that I was going to be transcended by the happiness by helping others. I had no idea any of that was on the table. I just knew I was bone tired. And I'm an Iowa girl, and that's where I grew up. And it was never enough for me. I come from a non-alcoholic family. You shook the tree, I was the only one that came out. And I had an idyllic childhood. My father and mother had a love affair their whole life. So I learned about love. I learned about love early. We had tradition with our church, and I loved the traditions. And I loved that God was about love. That's what I knew. And somewhere along the line in growing up, I started to see that people hurt people. I saw magazine articles. I heard about people hurting animals. I just had no idea that I thought, what's happening to my world that I had been so sheltered from, I guess. And so I started to have sleepless nights, and I started to worry about things, and my head got very loud, and I began to get that restless, irritable, and discontent with my young little perfect life. And my girlfriend that I was hanging out with, and we slept out one night camping out under the stars, as we did in the summer a lot. She said, tell me some secrets about yourself. And I did. I told her about the voices in my head and the spirits I saw in the river and all of that. And she just said, okay. But for 2 years, that woman didn't ask me. Well, she grew up. She's a woman now. She didn't ask me to play with her. For 2 years, she didn't invite me over to their farm to camp out and ride the horses. For 2 years. And I thought, don't tell. Something's a little bit off up there. And I'm one of 3 girls, and my brother's last. And I grew up in a family that we didn't compete. We all had our own gifts. But yet it seemed like to me that I wasn't enough. And I was beginning to have the feeling of, where's the mothership? Why did it drop me in Iowa? I'm supposed to be somewhere by a beach or somewhere, by somewhere beautiful. And I'm looking at cornfields and, and I thought it's not enough for me. And at 12 years old, I was hanging out with my neighbors, and they had a 57 Chevy, and we were driving around, and they would let me hang out with them. And we went to this woodsy, it's where everybody pulled their cars up on this hot summer night, and they all turned their radio stations to the same song. And there I was sitting on the hood of Mark and Greg Clark's 57 Chevy with my cut off jeans and my bare feet and my t-shirt and my trainer bra. And I was sitting next to one of the cheerleaders. Oh my goodness, I know who she is. And I remember she had her mohair sweater all tucked into her shorts. And she had those perfect little white kid sneakers on with her little socks rolled down perfectly. And I felt so like, oh my goodness, look at me. But I'll tell you what happened. She was Miss 38D with her mohair sweater tucked in. That's what was happening. And I had a little Canadian club with some Schlitz beer chaser, and I had a little more Canadian club with a little Schlitz beer chaser. And my trainer bra woke up, and I slid her off the car, and I told jokes, and I won the chug-a-lug contest with all the football players right out of the gate. And yeah, because I'm a gulper, and I had a great time. I had a rotten hangover. I don't remember actually crawling back into my bed in the house. They obviously dropped me off. But I remember what happened was like, why go to India? Some Canadian club. Why worry about world peace? Just drink some booze, because it hit home and it was powerful because my head shut up. My head shut up and I stood up taller, and I just had a feeling of omnipotence. And I thought, oh, this is good. I felt a part of, and I felt like I was better than everything all in one night. And from that point on, I was figuring it out how to get alcohol. I was stealing the alcohol. I was following you because I knew you were having a party and I knew where you were going to hide it. So I was following you. And then after you go away, I would go get your couple cases of beer or whatever it was and put it in my trunk, and then wait for a couple of weeks and invite you to our party. I was managing to water down my dad's booze. He had a beautiful bar with the Ham's beer, something, the lights with the little, the bear and the canoe and all that going around. And it was nobody cared about that bar hardly because they had it for business. But I used to like to just sit there. It was made of redwood, and it was half curved, and there were all these little bar seats, and it was in our basement, and Dad had the bottles up there. And then after a while I noticed there's a cupboard with some bottles with dust on them. So I was able to snag those bottles. It was a lot of sloe gin, Everclear, blackberry brandy, things like that. And so I was beginning to steal my dad's booze, and I was beginning to water it down. Nobody told me that. Nobody told me to water down booze. I just figured it out. And I was doing very well, though. I still had a smoke screen going in the high school. And I was, my family said, go do something, get out of Iowa, go to college. And I went to the White House, though, at 16, and I was chosen as a young citizen of America. I won a contest, and there were 100 of us from all over the country. And I was tipsy at the White House, stepping on my toes, worrying about falling into one of the first lady or somebody. And we went to the United Nations, and I was drinking. I wrote it in my diary. I had to keep a diary because I had to go back and talk to the Lions Club and thank them for sending me and buying my ticket and give them a slideshow. And I had literally 5 slides. And I had written in my little journal, I better be careful. So at 16, I know that I'm kind of headed towards something. I could outdrink anybody. And I, of course, I wasn't going to be your future. You're very lucky I wasn't. But I went off to college, and it was the 60s. It wasn't just say no, it was just say thanks. There was a lot going on at school, and I had fake IDs, and I was able to drink. And I'd only gotten brought home once by the highway patrol in Iowa because they knew my dad, and they brought me home. And I was lying through my teeth, and my brother said he was listening in the other room going, oh my God, you're slurring. What, I didn't know it was in the car, and it was like, I got grounded for the one and only time in my life growing up, because normally I wasn't in that kind of trouble. But the 60s started, and off to college I went, and I began to have to slide across the bar parts of my soul. It started then. It started when I caught my fiance thanking his tutor under a streetlight on the lips. And we were going to be married, and I got drunk and I jumped on him in the apartment. As soon as the lights went out, I let myself in, and I, and he sat on me, and I'm spitting at him, and I'm so mad, and he's holding me down, and I just hate him. I hate him. And when he let me go, I went home. I drove all the way home to my mother's house and my mom and dad's house. And I woke up my mother and we sat there and I remember I was so upset. I remember I ate Oreo cookies and milk and I had just had a 6-pack of Schlitz malt liquor because I had to have some energy, I guess. And but my mother said, "Aren't you going to cry?" And I said, "Nope, nope." And I slid across the bar, my tears started to harden up. And as I went down the road of alcoholism, King Alcohol was going to ask for pieces of me. And along the way, not just breaking your hearts, I broke my own heart. And I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I had no idea. But I'm a lot like Cliff. I drink and I go. I go. I had a big fight with my dad. I got drunk with the priest, the family priest, because I had cut my wrists and dad brought father down to talk to me at the university and he knew I was in trouble. And father and I drank, I don't know how many whiskey sours, ended up at a student union sit-in. And father was excited. He thought it was so much fun. And my dad, there was probably 2,000 people in that student union. And my dad was way across at the doorway towards the outside. And he was just looking at me like, it's the family priest. And my dad, shortly after that, sat me down. He said, "What is going on with you? You're different." And I love my dad. My dad played the accordion, and I'll tell you, he was from near Prague, in Heritage, and so my dad played an accordion, and guess who played the accordion? Just because I get my dad's eye, I want my dad's eye, and I'll tell you, it wasn't very cool back in those days. I know it's pretty cool now, and Zydeco is very cool, but I played in the Boddicker accordion band. We had we played on a hay wagon going through town at sauerkraut days or whatever it was, or maybe they had beef days or some big town festival. And they always had the Boddicker accordion band come. And we sat on hay bales and I'd have a hangover and I'd feel rotten, but I knew my dad would be in that crowd somewhere. We would turn the corner and I would see him, elbow his buddies, go, "That's my girl." Because I just wanted that from my dad. I love my dad. He could fix anything, but he couldn't fix me. And I knew it. I knew it. And I told my dad things that dads didn't need to know about their daughters. And so that was the last time I think we were eye to eye for about 8 years, 2.5 years into sobriety and 6 more years out there. Because he didn't need to know all the stuff I told him. He didn't need to know. I took the innocence right out of our relationship. And I had to slide across the bar the love of my dad. And I continued. I took a lot of geographics. I'm a seeker, but I didn't know what I was seeking. I was seeking what alcohol had given me, which was some sort of peace of mind, some sort of I fit in this world, some sort of it doesn't matter. And eventually what alcohol did for me was made me not care and not care that I didn't care. And from New York to back to Iowa, and something interesting happened. My dad said he'd pay for college. He paid for my art school if I actually went to school, but he wasn't going to pay for the party anymore. So I went back to art school, and a very interesting thing I noticed. I couldn't paint anymore. And it had been taken out of me. And I don't know if the bartender in New York City would have said, "Hey, girl, you're not going to ever paint again. That brush is going to mean nothing to you. You're never going to gesso another canvas." I would say, "Hey, you know what? Give me my alcohol, Mr. Bartender. I don't really care about your philosophy. If it's time to slide across the bar my art talent, you got it." And that's how I was traveling in my life, was everything that was beginning to have to go was going to go. And eventually I ended up leaving home again because my dad and I just you couldn't sit down at the table with us because you could cut the pain, literally the emotional pain, with a knife. If we went to grandma's house for Thanksgiving, I sat with the kids at the card table. I didn't ride in the same car as my dad. It was too painful to even be around us if we were together. You could feel the pain. So I ended up in Colorado, met Bob Dylan, came to California. I don't know if it was Bob Dylan, but It's like I didn't ask him for his ID, and I ended up at a place where they asked me to leave after a little while because I don't even fit in with people living on the edge. These people that I ended up with at this commune were panhandling for a living. Now, first of all, I'm too proud to ask people for money unless it's for booze. I don't want your money just to sit in the corner and panhandle. I was dancing with the Krishnas, having some fun. And they would come pick me up and they say, well, how much did you get? And I'd have 50 cents, but I was drunk because I had somebody buy me some wine all day. It was fun. And they'd say, what's wrong with you? And I drank their bong wine and they asked me to leave. And so there you go. I don't even fit in with those kind of people. And I ended up at an organic farm in northern Wisconsin. Now, you guys know what that's like. It's awful darn cold. It's cold. We're in a non insulated schoolhouse north of Boyceville, outside of a little place called Connorsville. And there's like 8 farms up there. And this guy from high school said, let me take care of you. And I thought, I'm tired. I'm like, sure, let's go. I had no idea how much work an organic farm was. No idea. And we had 50 head of organic sheep. And I'll tell you, eventually, I didn't fit in with them either because I drink and they don't. They drink these little glasses of dandelion wine or all these little wines that we had to make, this organic stuff. That was the big day when the wheat grinder came, so we could have these little organic wheat berries that make flour. Wheat berries with a grinder. And Mother Earth News would come and they'd be so excited. We tapped maple trees. It was insane. And I would drink when I could drink with my cheap wine. And I painted mailboxes. That was my job. You know, I had to paint mailboxes with the name of their farm on it. And eventually they saw something wrong with how I drank. And I would come into a hootenanny where everybody'd get together and they'd invite somebody that was a good player from Minneapolis. And I'd come in drunk and they'd say, what's wrong with you? Sit down. Don't you know who that is up there? I don't care who that is. You guys are boring and all you do is smoke pot and drool on yourselves. And they give me the spoons and make me sit in the corner to play the spoons. And I just thought, what is going on here? And I'll tell you, it was we had a wood stove and you know what you got to do? You got to buzz saw the wood, you got to chop the wood, you got to split the wood, you got to make kindling to even have tea. And many a time I was down there with that chopping block in the basement making wood so I could have tea with one eye. I'm surprised I have my toes. But eventually it just got to be too much work hanging out with these people. And they went off to do primal therapy and they gave me a little bit of money. Somebody got some money and they all left. And I got really drunk and sat in the hayloft and screamed at the sheep. And that was my primal. And they'd all run to one side and then they'd come back and then I'd scream at them again, doing my primal screaming and they'd all go away. I don't know how you make amends for that. I just thought of that. I haven't, but I have made amends to the animal kingdom in many ways, many, many ways, because at the end of my drinking, I had no more dogs, no more cats, no more boyfriends. Didn't matter. No more address. It didn't matter. But my mother thought I was going to have a life with this guy. And when they left, I harvested the crop that I had planted with a lot of sheep dung, short growing season, as you guys know, in northern Wisconsin. And so a lot of organic sheep dung, you have a nice crop of Maui Wowie seeds that have grown up. And I harvested that. And I was ready to make some money in Menominee because there was a college there and I had set something up to make some money so I could get out of town because winter's coming. I am not going to wake up with everything frozen shut like it was. And I go to this college town and meet these people I'm supposed to meet. And they said, well, where's the stuff? And I had left it in hefty bags back on the farm, which was at least a 45-minute, 50-minute drive. So I just did what you did. I just turned around and saw the lights of a carnival that happened to be in town that night. And I went over there and met the owner of the show and thought, well, maybe I could be a carnival worker and get out of town. And I went shot for shot with some tequila with him. And he said, you're hired only if you have a trailer hitch. And I did. I had a trailer hitch on my car. So the next day I showed up with my hefty bags in the back, of course. I told my dog to get in. I painted a sun on the hood. I should have written bust me on the side because that was going to happen. And I put my little joint on the back, it was a shooting gallery, all nice and tucked in and a nice little white trailer. And I hit the road with Matt Armstrong shows. And I called my mother from Arkansas. And this is when I I used to say to everybody in my family when they would look at me, or somebody would say, "What's wrong with you?" Even some of my alcoholic friends would look at me, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm not hurting anyone but me. Just stand back and leave me alone. And that's the biggest lie we tell, because the minute we walk in and sit down, 10 people's lives get better. Maybe they can go to a movie because they're not going to be called by the bail bondsman because they know you're sitting with us. Maybe I can sleep tonight because I know you're safe sleeping somewhere instead of out on the streets. My mother lost nights and nights and nights and nights and nights of sleep. And just because a Norm Alpy used to say, "I'm overpaid. I'm just so overpaid," because my mother slept at night for all those years I was sober. And I'm so grateful for that, because when I called my mother from Arkansas and told her I had joined the carnival, she started to cry. And I couldn't say, "Come on, mom, I'm not hurting anyone but me." It just didn't seem to work in that conversation. She was crying. And I said, "Come on, mom, I'm writing a book." It was the best I could come up with. And I had to slide across the bar the love of my mom, and my mom and I were always, always close. And from that point on, my life got very strange because there was really no more family. There was no more calling home at the holidays. There was no more coming home. I remember the last time I think I tried to come home, and the plane stopped somewhere like in Bettendorf, or I don't know, but I got off the plane, and I was really drunk and really lost. And I asked one of the guys, he said, "No, this isn't Cedar Rapids." It's like I couldn't even make it home. I couldn't even make it home. And so the carnival was a place where I also got asked to leave in a very strange way because I maced people. I wasn't nice to people. I'm drinking tequila. Even my nice dog was starting to bite people. And that was just the way it was. I turned into somebody that I didn't even know, because I had to, I'm surviving. I'm surviving with people that, they're living on the edge too. And eventually I had a knock on the door in Bogalusa, Louisiana one morning very early, and it was the Washington Finest coming with their big guns and everything. And they stood me up by the wall and, stuck a shotgun in my belly. And thank God they gave me a sheet to put around me. And they went through everything and they found everything. And now I'm up for a felony in the state of Louisiana for sales and possession. And all the way there, I said, "I'm not selling, I'm bartering." I was not selling. I was like, "Shut up. You didn't Miranda me. Nobody read me my rights. Shut up." I was like, "Where am I?" And I didn't have any fresh alcohol. I didn't have any fresh alcohol. And I never had DTs like that before. And I cut myself anywhere you could see me because I wanted fresh blood on me, because at nighttime in this big den of people, mostly women, where I was, they would come in at night and pick somebody and have their fun and bring them back in the morning. It was really a crazy place. And I thought, what am I doing here? How come the carnival's not coming back? How come? And so I had no booze, and everybody, I was really very paranoid, and they left me alone. They said, "She's crazy." Yep, I am. And one day they put cuffs on me and they drove me somewhere and threw me in a room, and there sat my dad. He had hired a lawyer, bail bondsman, and a judge who was going to write a big check and get me out of there. And I'll tell you, when I looked to my left and saw my dad there, I slid to the floor and I sat there, and we talked about that day when I was 20 years sober. I didn't go home and rip off scabs, that's for sure. I've been guided through every single amends I've made in my sobriety. Thank you, God. And at 20 years of sobriety, it was okay to talk to him about that day now. And he said, the only thing I said the whole day they would ask me questions. And they're trying to do, I don't know what they were doing, but they would ask me questions. And he said, every time you had to answer a question, you either said, "I am not guilty," or "It is not my fault." And I was becoming less and less of a human being with any responsibility for life, because eventually I was going to slide across the bar of my life. But I'm here, so that part didn't work. But my dad went home thinking they were going to let me out, and they didn't. And eventually, when they kicked me out, I found New Orleans. I found the French Quarter. I found all of you. And 24/7 town, and I loved it, and it was crazy, and it was great, and I didn't care about day or night. I didn't care about anything but surviving and drinking and having my alcoholic friends. We were all in this together. We were all quarter rats, and we took care of each other. And I got fired for certain jobs, and I ended up eventually I worked for a very seedy, sorry little Lower Decatur street bar where you could smell the bathroom as you hit the front door. And at the end of my drinking, my alcoholic friends didn't want to drink with me either, even for a free drink at my bar. And in Zoom, thank you, God, I had two of them that have been sober, 8 years less than me, 9 years less than me. And we've, that's a miracle in itself. And they admitted on Zoom in a women's meeting that they didn't want to drink with me anymore. And it was true. I knew it. They said, you were hitting bottom way before we were, and you were not fun anymore. So I am so glad that Robin and Denny are sober, because they've become a big part of my amends and a big part of my life and a big part of the changes that have happened for me and a big part of the gifts and the miracles that happen if you just show up and try to do your best. I tried to 12-step them at the New Orleans International Convention of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1980, when I was just about 5 years sober. And Robin was so drunk, she slept on my bed with the big book. And I had to zip her back up because she was coming out of everywhere. She was just like, on her. And then Denny didn't recognize me, and she was my roommate. She kept saying, she owned this bar, and I stood there sober in front of her, 4 years and 10 months sober, and she didn't recognize me. And she thought, what is this girl doing in my way? Will she please just leave? She said, I kept walking around you, and then you said who you were, and I couldn't believe it. Just how you cleaned me up spoke volumes to that French Quarter, those people there. People couldn't believe I was sober. I was making amends. I had a boss that wouldn't take my money, and he kept following me. We were going to music, a bunch of us. And I kept going. I said, let's go outside, because he said he couldn't believe I was sober. He was following me because he thought I was surely going to be drinking. And he wouldn't take my money. And I said, Dutch, I got to do something. And he was such a good guy. And he said, all right, okay, this is what you can do. He said, I want you to come to my bar and I'll buy you a Coke, and you're going to tell me every time you come that you're still with it, which means in carnival terms, that means I'm still in it. I'm with it. I'm with the show. I'm still sober. And that's what he wanted me to tell him. And that's what he asked me to do, is to stay sober and to keep coming to New Orleans when I go for a business trip or a conference. And I thought, well, I'm not going that often, but people in my group are saying, hey, Sharon, I'm going to New Orleans. Where do I go? Who do I see? Where's the meeting? I said, here, but go to Fritzl's and ask for Dutch and ask for a Coke and tell him Cher, because that was my name, Share. Tell him Cher's still sober. And I don't know how many of you Dutch met, but he met a lot of you, and he was happy to hear I was still sober. I was still with it. And that was just a miracle, because later on in my sobriety, and I'm segueing because I don't want to forget about this, Denny got sober. She was the second one. Robin got sober, and then Denny got sober. And Denny was my roommate, and she sold the Blue Saloon, and then she got sober and went to law school. And so she went from the bar to the bar. She passed the bar. And so she one day decided to look up my case, and she looked up my case, and she saw that she could put me in a general pardon that the governor was doing at this time, that she happened to be looking at, of first-time offenders, and I fit right in there. And so one day in the mail came this piece of paper that gave me all my rights back for fun and for free. And Rob and Denny and I are still in touch, and we sat in an Oklahoma Canyon conference with a pouring rain, and I had seen them for the first time. I hadn't seen them before. First time sober. And they were probably about 3 or 4 years sober then. And I was coming to that conference, and I pulled up, and they were sitting with all the Al-Anons because they were nervous about seeing me. All the Al-Anons around them on the porch at the Canyon conference. And that weekend we sat there in the rain one whole day, because it was some monsoon, and talked about our gods. How does that happen? We were dying of alcoholism, but for the grace of God, seconds and inches, we are the lucky ones. So I ended up coming to California, trying to find Hawaii, and I ended up at Barney's Beanery, which is the West Hollywood bar, and this girl was drunk as a skunk with her head on the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and people, I think, were signing what I guess was a court card. They were signing their names. I remember that. And then they would pass it and sign. And she was upset because she said, somebody wrote Mickey Mouse or something. That. So the bartender said, you're not driving drunk to your AA meeting, so I'm calling you a taxi. So the taxi comes, and this girl, her name is Chris, running. Didn't make it. 31 years, died of wet brain. But at that time, she was going to be my Eskimo at Alcoholics Anonymous, and she was in and out of AA. And that was my first meeting of her. And she went out and fell in the taxi with the big book under her arm. I was embarrassed for her. And we took my tequila and everybody else's drink, and we said, good for you, Chris, going to A&A. And that was April of 75. And what you had now in front of you was something that her mother would not have recognized. I had my gallbladder removed. I had pancreatitis. I had splotches on my face. I wore a Panama hat all the time, so you couldn't look in my eyes. If I got on a motorcycle, I had a bandana around. I had a red dashiki I'd wear a lot because I didn't bathe. I had jeans that were torn. I had no more dog, no more calling home. And that's April. And I felt sorry for her going in a taxi to A&A. And I couldn't get my old job back in New Orleans. I got on a plane. I came back to California, and I never made Hawaii. But what happened was I made Palm Springs, and I was on a motorcycle, and the motorcycle guys left me and my girlfriend, and they didn't want to party with us. And I guess we got in the car. I'm a blackout drinker. And she left me in the car with these people, and they drove away, and they ended up breaking my jaw in 3 places in my nose and dragging me around on the cement, giving me a concussion. I don't remember much about that whole night. But when I came to, I was face down in the sand, and I heard the car door slam, and I thought, I got to get out of here. And I lifted my head, and I heard a voice, and the voice said, get up, I want to live. I think that's that great fact deep down within every man, woman, and child. I think that was what it was. It was the ember of life, but I heard it. And I guess I did get up. And the next thing I remember is I'm on a gurney, and there's police there because they have no idea. And they're asking my name, and they're prepping me for surgery. And I'm writing on this clipboard or whatever it was. I'm laying down writing, and I see the word victim in front of my name. And I think, yes, I'm happy to see I have something in front of my name other than, loser. It says victim. And I thought, okay, that's it. I get it. That's me. Because I had been not taking responsibility for my life for a long time. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and no alcohol, but a lot of morphine. That's what was happening there. And on my birthday, August 6th, the nurses they felt sorry for me. They brought a banner and cards, and I'm wired on the inside. I'm wired on the outside. I'm broken. I can't even touch my cheekbones for 6 months. I was just like a mess. And as they left, they put a little glass of wine in front of me. And of course a straw, because I had the tooth kicked out. And that's the only way I can suck anything is through a straw through the wires on my face. And I sat there looking at that little glass of wine thinking, oh my, it's been a while. And I put the straw in there, and I stuck it through the wires of my teeth, and I tried to drink this wine, and it wouldn't go down. And I literally got up to the sink, and I had to be careful to not throw up in my mouth. It ran out of my mouth because I could aspirate. They gave me scissors. I walked around with scissors for 3 months in case I throw up in my mouth, I guess. And I poured it down the sink, and I never did that. I drank alcohol with my own vomit in it. I was on a chug-a-lug contest one night. I wasn't going to lose, and I was right at the end, and that guy was going to beat me, and I got a little sick in my glass, and I threw it back down, and I won. I don't throw away alcohol. I don't. And there I did. And it was like my roommate there in the hospital was in a coma. And I remember looking at her, and with my broken jaw, my way I couldn't talk, I said, don't you tell anyone I did that. it was important for me to tell the woman in a coma in my hospital room that don't tell anyone that I did that, which was pour this little glass of wine down the sink. And I ended up living above a liquor store where the guy would buy me cheap wine every day. And I would drink that cheap wine every day when he'd go off to work, and he let me sleep on his couch. And there was no more fun in alcohol, and there was no more life in alcohol, and there was no more omnipotence in alcohol. And I was pretty dead. And on August 20th, he said, "You have to leave. You're depressing me." And I had nowhere to go. And I called my mom. And my mom had gotten a call from some girl in the hospital who didn't tell her which hospital in California I was and what had happened to her daughter, and that I had made the paper. And I got a copy of that paper, and here's the victim thing, and right next to it is the obituary. So I was this close. Somebody got me a copy about 2 months ago of that paper, and it was like, what? And my mother didn't know. And she took her 2 days, and my other sister, 2 days of calling every hospital to find out what shape I was in, that it was going to be okay. She was asleep at night at all for those 2 nights. So I called my mom because I had nowhere to go. And my mom said to me, "Sharon, we can't help you anymore. Go to the Salvation Army." And I got kicked in the gut because mom always helped, always helped. And I put the phone down, and I could barely catch my breath. And I looked down, and every day I'd been sitting for maybe a week, however long this guy was letting me stay with him. There was a phone book, a telephone, and my wine bottle. But this day there was a phone number sitting there. And I looked at it, and I recognized the name. It was the girl with the big book in the bar. I didn't put it together. I just knew she was always nice to me. Oh, Chris Running. Oh, I can call her. And I called her, and she wasn't sober that day. And she said, "I know what happened to you, and I know where you belong, and I can't help you today, but call Suzanne and get a pen and write this down." And I wrote down this number, and I called a stranger. Now, I can't talk very well, and this is the way I came to you in Alcoholics Anonymous. Wired shut, couldn't talk for 3 months, and I had to learn to listen. And all I can tell you is, if you can't talk here in Alcoholics Anonymous, or there's something impending, and you can't speak, everybody wants to talk to you. I learned so much by having everybody tell me all secrets of their story. I guess they thought I'd never talk again or something. So I learned a whole lot about you guys. It was crazy. And she said to me, "Sharon, call this woman." And I called her, and that woman went to work on me. She said, "Put your drink down, put your joint down. I know where you are. Go sit on the steps. These girls are going to come get you." It was like, whoa. So I sat on the steps with my broken face and my broken life and my broken spirit, and my backpack with my worldly possessions, my broken jeans, and my book "Be Here Now" by Baba Ram Das, whatever that meant. And I sat on the steps, and this car pulled up, and they were shiny and bright, and the car was shiny and bright. And I thought, I'm not leaving with these people. But they picked me up, put me in the back, and I couldn't get out. And the windows don't go down in a little Volkswagen. So I sat there detoxing, smelling, not able to speak. It seems like every red light, somebody would turn around and talk to me. And I just thought, wow, they talk a lot about themselves. And I had that original newspaper clipping, which went to shreds, in my pocket in case you ever asked. And you didn't ask. And we ended up at a church, and I thought, okay, I got to do this just because I need a place to sleep. I'll play the game. Because me and God, we had a parting many, many, many years ago when I had to slide across the bar, the love of my God. And so here I am in this church, and the man is the minister, but he hooked me. He said, "I was waiting for the spaceship to land and say, you can come home now, Bill." I thought, oh my God, I found my spaceship people. I looked at all of you. You all look like spaceship people. I mean, it just the way I felt really at home, and I felt like, okay, this is okay. I could be with my spaceship people. And then after the meeting, this guy puts this book down in front of me, Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, I recognize that book. That girl, Chris, had that book. Now, Chris was dating that guy, and that's how I ended up with him. She told him to come out and get me at the hospital. It was all my day to come to you. I think grace falls on us all the time. Grace is a beautiful, beautiful gift that is just given, whether we want it or not, whether we've earned it or not. But that day I was in the flow because I was surrendered. That day I was in the flow because I had no where to go. I had no friendly direction, as my sponsor Clancy used to say. And I ended up where I belonged, and you guys treated me like I was a diamond in the rough. Some man came up to me and said, "You look tired, kid. Why don't you stay with us a while?" And I thought, well, that's nice. Somebody said, "Take your backpack off. You look like you're tired, kid. Stay with us. Maybe stay with us longer because you look really tired." Nobody expected anything from me. And you took me home and you sat in the car till the liquor store lights went off and you sent me upstairs. And the next day you moved me out and I slept on floors because the 12-step house wouldn't take me because I was a liability. So I detoxed in the middle of you. And I always remember that when somebody needs a couch. Because when I was new, we had real 12-step calls. We had like Rolodex. And they were out. I was a B. I got married to a B in Alcoholics Anonymous. So the central office would call all the A's, and then at 2 a.m, they get to the B's. And so we would go out to a cheap motel by the airport. We lived near Inglewood, and God, there'd be these great 12-step calls. Or sometimes they would come back, and sometimes you'd never see them again. And the lady have a black eye, I'd be so proud to take her to a meeting, and oh, it was absolutely fabulous. And then I got a friend, and the friend came and slept on my couch. And she had another sponsor, and she was my friend. And I let her sleep on my couch because I had a couch. And Sandy didn't make it. And I don't know where she is. I don't know where she is. She came in and out and in and out and in and out. And the last time she called me, she didn't want me to come get her. She just wanted some money. And I said, "I don't know, Sandy, I'm going to come get you. You're going to come back to my couch." And she hung up, and I never saw her again. So I remember how kind you were to me. I don't remember much about what the steps were or what having all of this is. I got a sponsor. She moved me to a couch, and my life started because she got on me. Read 3 pages of that book. I was still not speaking. I had to read 3 pages a night. I had to get on my knees at night because I'm sleeping on her couch. I've got a borrowed sleeping bag. She wrote down this little prayer. "Thank you for all you've given me. Thank you for all you've taken away from me. Thank you for all you've left me." She said, "And every night I want you to say that prayer on your knees." So when everybody was asleep at 2 a.m, I didn't want God to know. He was already in Australia, waking up all my friends over there. I just would get on my knees and say that little prayer with my little broken jaw, slide it under the pillow, get back in bed, and I would sleep. I would sleep. I learned to sleep here. And that sponsor started me with the steps and the book and having me write things because I couldn't talk. And you had me have a cup washing commitment. And the cup washing commitment was next to a guy that I couldn't stand. And, and he would just look at me and tell me to hurry up. And there were ashes in the sink and cups in the sink and one big sink. And I didn't know what to do. And this lady who was in the CIA in our group, her name was Pat. She walked around, said in my ear, "Wash." So I just washed. I mean, I needed direction. And that lady, Pat, was going to come in my life at times when I needed things, like something from her that I never expected. When she was taking me home one night, we went to fellowship. I'm still not eating. I'm just trying to drink coffee. I don't like coffee. I'm smoking a lot of cigarettes, and my mother sent me a blender so I could eat some food through the straw. But I'm drinking this coffee and it's dribbling out of my mouth. And I realize across the table from me, these people that are having eggs and fellowship and talking, and I can't do any of it, right? I'm just like the big loser in the room. And Pat, the CIA lady, was taking me home that night. And she looked at me and she just looked at, what is this pig doing with hot coffee dribbling down her mouth through her t-shirt on the table? But she didn't say that. She took a napkin and she reached over and put it on the corner of my face, put it on the puddle on the table, and was going back to her conversation with my friend Junan. But before she started a conversation, she looked back at me and she gave me a wink. That was very out of character for Pat, I got to tell you. And the wink said, "You're going to be okay, kid." And the kindness is what I remember. Now, I've had a really big, beautiful life in Alcoholics Anonymous with you. I've had 45 years plus walking on the sunny side of the street, making amends, living a life that I didn't know I could have, falling in love, having your heart broken, all of that in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I landed in a home group my very first day, the Pacific group. one of the most active groups on the West Coast. Many of you have been there. Many of you have been there. Many of you met the founder, who was a guy named Clancy, who we lost last August 24th. And but I had no idea. I would have run, believe me. I don't like structure. I don't like discipline. I don't like to be told what to do, but I was so beautifully surrendered that I started to listen. I had to listen like the ears of the dying, as it talked about. That's what I was listening with. There was no place for me to go. And I was loved into some sort of life again. You breathed some sort of life into me with your kindness. And yeah, when the wires came off, I had to go get a job, and I got a $24 a week room, and I got a telephone and a Mr. Coffee, and somebody left a teddy bear on Halloween. I remember they left a teddy bear. And so I had this teddy bear that they had left at the restaurant. And that was, I had a couple of chairs and a bed. And they've made that $24 a week room. There was a whole bunch of them in a row into a storage unit. So I drove by there and I went, oh, it was small. I remember it was small. But what happened in that little $24 a week room was I had a telephone that I started to make phone calls from. I had a Just for Today taped up on my mirror because my sponsor had said to do something nice for someone every day without getting found out. And I still do that. That was 45 years ago. I still do that. And I don't know where Janet is, my first sponsor. Last I saw a picture of her maybe 5 years ago. She was a little old junkie lady living in New Mexico and not sober. But she saved my life because she was smarter than me, faster than me. She said, you're going to run. I can see it. I was like, how does she know I'm planning it? I've been here too long. She did things like that. Well, she just got me. I remember one night I was, okay, I am going to ask for a night off. I had been to a meeting every single night. And I don't know, maybe it was 5 months, 6 months sober. I'm going to test her. So I called her and I said, you know what? I want to watch the Country Western Music Awards tonight. They're on. Can I take the night off? Now, I don't even like country music unless I'm drinking gin. That was when I really liked country music. And so what she said to me was, I think you have a commitment there. No, you need to go to your meeting. I thought, ugh. So I went to my meeting and I'm sitting in the front and I'm still mad at her, and then I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, she has a commitment at this meeting and I didn't see her. I bet she's home watching those Country Western Music Awards. And all of a sudden from the back of the room, I heard her laugh. And she had a laugh that embarrassed me, but I'll tell you what happened that night when I heard her laugh. She laughed like a duck. She'd go quack, 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 quack. And I would just like, oh my God, that's my sponsor. And she would look at me and go, oh my God, that's my baby. But that night when I heard her laugh, I just settled in my seat and I smiled. There was a sense of security and safety I hadn't felt in a long time. And that's how you just brought me back to health. And you brought me back and you sat me down and said, this is the life you can have. Now you've got to take the steps. As my sponsor, Sandy Beach, my good friend, he was like my spiritual sponsor for many years, especially after my husband died. He said, the book is not the treasure, it's the treasure map. Get a guide, go through the book, go find your treasure. And it's just much like Clancy said, you can memorize it. It's like a recipe. You can memorize the recipe and you can buy all of the equipment you need to make the recipe. But if you never make the recipe, you're going to starve to death. And I've learned how to take Alcoholics Anonymous out into the world. I've learned how to take Alcoholics Anonymous wherever I go. I've learned how to have the blessings with the grace by being in the flow, by being awakened. I had no idea what being awakened was going to be about. I had no idea. And it's much like Bill talked about when he left Akron to go to New York and was leaving what they had built in Akron and he was going to go build it in New York. And it says, little did I know, I think it's on page 158. And it's transcended by the happiness. I love this part because that's what's happened to me in A Vision for You. It says, though they knew they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober, that motive became secondary. It was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. And being awakened, to me, that's what it is. It's giving myself for others. And when I'm not in that grace and not in that flow and not in God's love that day, boy, I don't like it, because then I'm back into self, and self to me is all about what I need or what I want or what I don't have or what's wrong. And that's not how I want to live my day. My day is precious. My life with you is precious. I got to make amends, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then we can all go off to Lou, because he's fun. I had fun last night. I actually stayed and danced with y'all. Um, but my amends to my dad was very tertiary when I went home. I finally did my 4 and 5 when I was about, oh God, she just kept pushing me and pushing me. And I was, I was, I was brain dead. Literally, I had to have my brain come back into life. And when you're working in service and you're waiting tables, you got to do things right. And so I waited tables for 2.5 years till I went out in the world, and I got a different job, and then I got a different job, and then I built a career. But you have to have a good attitude when you're in service. You can't just, somebody says, how are you today? I don't know. I'm thinking about myself. How are you? What do you want? I wasn't making any tips. The Al-Anons showed me how to do this. So I acted like a phony, and nobody knew. My tips got better. I thought those Al-Anons are smart. Queen Bee Sally Carpenter did that to me one night. So many people I've loved that have had it fingerprints all over my life, or in that big meeting in the sky. And I'm not sad about it. I'm happy about it. My tears are tears of joy, my tears of gratitude, because no matter what has come down the pike, I've had gratitude. And I went home and I did my little tertiary amends to my dad. My mom and I were great. And my dad just said to me, I just always wanted you to be happy, Sharon. So my sponsor said, then be happy. When you call home, you're happy. When you go home, you're happy. So that was my job with my dad. I thought, well, I could do that. And so I was happy when I would have a visit home, or he would come out, and he came out, walked me down the aisle at 2.5 years. And I married the bee. So we had a lot of those 12-step calls, which was fun and great and heartbreaking, and wondered what happened to those women. But you taught me, that, I'm just one drink away from out the door, in the grave, gone. And I love that smell, though. I love that detoxing alcoholic smell. I can't wait to get back to some meetings where I can smell the coffee and smell the detoxing alcoholic. That is that. I think we need scratch and sniff for that in the Zoom. Somebody's got to figure that out. Coffee and detoxing smells, until we can get back to the reality of it all. But my dad walked me down the aisle. We went to a meeting. My dad bought the big book. He's a reader. At 5 years of sobriety, I get another sponsor. She said, Sharon, it's time for you. Her name was Jenny. Time for you to call your dad and just maybe ask him if you can pay him back that money you owe. You got a better job now. And I thought, I'm not calling her about amends, but they do that. They go to sponsor school. They stick it in there. Oh, they change your life again. So I called my dad, and my dad was ready. I didn't know he had gone to his office. He had taken out my dossier. He had run a calculator tape, and he had stuck it in the big book that he bought when we were together at the Pacific Group, when he was going to walk his daughter down the aisle. And my mother told me that after my dad was gone, because she knew how defiant I was. I'm defiant. Boy, that has just been saturated by the principles and walking through things with you and being in your life and having intuition that's all about not me anymore. It's about what I can do for the world. Chuck C said, we got to help God's kids get things done. And that's my job. But that defiance has been saturated by all of that footwork that you've taught me how to put in there, so that I am not that taproot of defiance anymore. It's still there. It's still a taproot. It can grow at any time. But my mother didn't tell me things about my dad, that he had run a calculator tape, that he was ready for me when I called, because he knew I call. Most alcoholics owe money, page 78, 79. So I was like upset, and my sponsor laughed, and I called my dad back, and he accepted my payment terms. I called my sponsor back, and she said, okay, this is going to be, your amends to your dad, and I don't want you to be late with that check. And besides, Bill and Bob are watching. So I don't lay that on one of your girls or guys. It's like Bill and Bob are watching. I'll disappoint you. I'll disappoint God. But Bill and Bob, nope. I'm going to be on time, because Bill and Bob are watching. Being the example of Alcoholics Anonymous anywhere is my privilege. And my job is to be in the flow, have my eyeballs outward, have my hands ready to help, have my soul open, and help other God's kids. That's it. It's so simple. So my dad accepted my payment terms, and my sponsor said to me, because you do that for me. You lift me to another view. I don't know, I can see. You lift me to another view and you give me vision past what I think where the world ends. And what she said to me was going to take me to that place with my dad. She said, "Are you willing to grow through this with your dad?" That's an odd question. So I said, "Okay." She said, "Put a note in with that check to your father so your dad doesn't get the whole cold hard cash alone in the envelope. Give your dad a note about your life." That was hard to do because he's got a Mensa sister, my sister, and my sister in Alaska with a horse, and my brother with a doctorate. Sharon went on a jail panel. That's what Sharon went on a jail panel. And that's what he got. He got me. And my dad got a check and a note, and the check and the note turned into a card, and the card turned into a letter, and it was pretty easy to do. And somewhere along that 4 years and 10 months of the check and the note, I went back to Iowa for a vacation and a couple weeks, and my dad and I hung out together all day, and we had a good day, and we're driving back, and we're just about to Cedar River Road, and there's an A&W there, and my dad said, "Hey, do you want a root beer?" And I said, "Yeah, root beer would be nice, Dad." My dad introduced me to his coffee clutch that day, and it was a really good day. We just got along all day long because somewhere along the line, it had changed with the check and the note. And so we were getting our root beers, and I start walking back to the car, and he said, "No, there's a picnic table. Let's go sit at the picnic table in the shade tree." And so we did. And if you would have been getting your root beer, you would have looked over and gone, "Look, there's a dad and a daughter just having a root beer and a chat." And if you would have looked under that picnic table, you would have seen my legs swinging like a little 6-year-old girl because the innocence had come back between me and Dad. I didn't know that would happen. Are you willing to grow through this with your dad? And after 4 years and 10 months of my dad getting the note, he's called me. He said, "Merry Christmas, daughter. I don't want your money anymore, but don't stop sending me your notes." And we got to walk into a new view together. And my dad was killed in 99, and it was quick, and it was sad. And AA was in my mother's living room, and many of you showed up. And when my mother passed away in Madison, Wisconsin 5 years ago, I'm looking at two people now that showed up. Many of you showed up. We show up for each other. We show up for each other. And Clancy had become my sponsor because at 10 years of sobriety, my husband decided he wanted the newcomer in the room, and nobody got custody of the meetings. And it was painful, painful. And I was betrayed. And oh my God, what a great, that is better than anything to be betrayed. It's better than justified. Betrayal is perfect. And I was mad at all of you. And I had an attitude. And that CIA lady, Pat, one day I'm sitting there, it's a meeting, it's Saturday night, everybody's got date night. They're in the back of the room looking all happy. And I'm sitting in the front with my legs out, and you got to walk over me to get anywhere. If you want to get in the row, I'm not going to move my legs. You walk over me. You guys, y'all knew it, and you betrayed me, and I'm mad at all of you, and I have an attitude. I have this little baby that's about 2 years old, and he's with me at meetings, and he had night tremors, and he wouldn't sleep at night. It was all really hard here. But Pat was there with her newcomer, and I wouldn't move my legs. And she looked at the newcomer, looked at me, looked at the newcomer, looked back at me, and said, "Sharon's got 10 years. Do you want what she's got?" And she walked over my legs and got in the row. And I thought, oh man, really? And I heard her. And I saw Clancy that night, and I was ready to throw hot coffee on them because they were happy and pregnant in that order and going to get married. And Clancy said, "No coffee, but hand here," said, "Sharon, you're going to walk through this with dignity and grace." And I didn't care about it. I wanted revenge. But he said the words I heard. So you can be an example to others. And that's what I did. I respected the example enough in Alcoholics Anonymous to do another inventory, to look at my wrongs in a marriage where I felt betrayed. And I had to do that. And the reason Clancy became my sponsor at 10 years, because I was going to run, and my sponsor, I picked her up at the airport, Ginny, the one I loved. She had 21 days instead of 21 years. She smoked pot in Paris. It was a hard year. It was a really hard year. And Jenny got sober again before she died. She got sober again, and she was happy. And I'm glad to know that. And we were friends. But Clancy was lighter than my head, and I'm so glad because I was going to run, and I had this baby boy. And I got to tell you, little did I know that when he left her, because sometimes that's how it happens, that she told me, you know what? I know I could walk through it because I watched you. So the person in the room that I didn't want to have my example, that I didn't pray for her to drink, but I literally would pray. I don't, okay, God, if you want to make her die, okay. I'm not going to ask you to make her drink though. I mean, it was hard. She told me that. And I'll tell you, we started getting the boys together and we started to build a life as single moms with our kids. And she's my best friend today. We went to France a couple years ago. We went to Europe. We had fun. We do holidays together. She's one of my dearest friends. She's one of the five. I have five people in my life that always know where I am. I have a new sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous after Clancy passed. Three of you, three men that had a lot of time around this country picked up the phone and called me and said, Sharon, you have a sponsor, don't you? I felt so cared for. Yeah, I did, because it was already in place, because that's the way my sponsor wanted it. And I know her number by heart because I may lose my cell phone and that's my lifeline. So if you don't know your sponsor's number by heart, I suggest it's a good thing to learn. And I met my Casey, and I'm going long here. Give me a couple more minutes. Casey was my soulmate. 1 year, 1 month, and 14 days in the hallway. And then the door opened and I met my soulmate, and we were together 24 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys knew him. Many of you knew him. We did AA together. I remember when we went to We Are Not Saints and we got to do that workshop on principles, and we had so much fun. We got to just take Alcoholics Anonymous wherever we were asked to go. We've just had adventures and love and life, and he loved the golf. I was building this career in this law firm, which 2 years ago they cut a lot of people, and I was one that went after 30 years of doing what I did. So I'm semi-retired and happy, but it was a hard transition, I got to tell you. Another one where I stayed close to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I stayed in the middle with my loving God. I sat on my loving God's lap every morning and I said, good morning, God, what do we need to do? Now, it's been 9 years since my husband passed away. And he was sick for a couple of years with malignant melanoma, and we got to travel a lot. I took a leave of absence and we got to travel a lot. And it was miracle after miracle after miracle because of going to Alcoholics Anonymous, finding the meetings, finding the people, finding the best golf course, finding the best place to eat. It was just magical. We had magical moments, and I am not disappointed at all that I took that money out of the bank and we got to travel. I am so grateful that that was more important than something else in my life. And I have a child, and he's 36 now, and he's doing fantastic. And my husband Casey, we got married. He had my son walked me down the aisle in Las Vegas. It was fun, but we were together 24 years, married 5. And we didn't live together the first 18. We lived 10 minutes apart. He was building a life. I was building a life. I'm a mom. I've got kids. This has got to go to school. It was great. We did a lot of AA, and the phone was always ringing. And then when we found our place, the coffee pot was always on, and there was always somebody there in various stages of the steps. Kleenex out. My son just got to see a lot of growth in people all around him, and he is still very much in touch with a lot of the women that helped him when he was new, helped him fold his t-shirts, helped him, work on a school project with me. This is a family disease. And in sobriety, it's still a family disease. And I had to learn how to be not a mean mom. I had to learn how to be his mother and to be somebody who was soft and generous with my time. And Lori talked about that, and I understand that. I remember my son looking at me and said, "You're a mean mom." And he was like 4. And I just called my sponsor crying. And he said, "Well, what does your son like to do?" He said, "Legos." So I made Lego time. And, that's just a small thing, but it helped me so much to be present. Because this is where God is. I wake up in the morning and my dog thinks her name is God. Because I say God's name about 8 times when I wake up in the morning, because that's the first thing I want to do is I want to say God's name and I want to say, good morning, God. Thank you for another day. And but my dog is all happy because she jumps around, and that's how I start my day. And I end my day. I end my day with gratitude. I end my day thinking about the day and thinking about what I can do tomorrow. And just recently, I've started doing some writing. Again, I used to journal books. I had all kinds of journal books when I moved, and they were all out there for the garbage man to take away. Somebody put them all out there in the pile of all the garbage when I was moving. I went, oh no, you can't have my journal books. So I went out there in the rain. I'm grabbing all my journal books, which I still have. Some of them are a little wrinkled, but I don't know how that happened. But I thought, I don't want the garbage man to read my life there. So I don't know. I'm an open book. I'm an open book. I don't walk around saying I'm an AA. I am just who I am. I am one of God's kids helping other God's kids get things done. And my life is like full, full of the joy of sobriety, full of the joy of life, full of the joy of watching the transition in you, watching the transformation that comes about. I am so grateful to be part of it all. And I know that, I love Blake because he's kind of a weird mystic. And he was uninspired. And this is my last story. And he was sitting on the Ganges, and he was trying to get inspired. And he was sitting there on this big river in India. And he was wondering what was happening because the Ganges is huge. And there were all these boats going down the river that were on fire. And he couldn't figure it out. And then a local walked by and he said, what's going on? And he said, oh, it's the day we honor our dead. And they have days when they can honor their dead, and they put them in the boat, and they wrap them in linen, and they put all the beautiful things that this person loved, and they say prayers over this person, and then they light the boat on fire, and it's a pyre of life going down the Ganges. And he was sitting there and he was looking at all these boats on fire, one after the next after next. Look at all those lives. Look at all those lives gone. And he finally got his inspiration. And it's so beautiful. He said, look at this. When they put me in my boat and they wrap me in linen and give me all the things I love, I want a big book. I want the hair of all the dogs and the animals I've loved in life. I want an eagle feather. I want some of my favorite chocolate. I want a list of all the people that I've sent Christmas cards to. I want pictures of my family. I want pictures of those I love. And then you can light me up and push me down. And when you push me down and light me up, may I be all used up. Thank you so much for having me. I love you very much.